Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning and salam Idul Fitri. Welcome to our 13th session of webinar series, Captain of Industry, brought to you by Faculty of Engineering. We are initiating industry collaboration during MCO to have a platform with our Captain of Industry to share their thoughts, way forward and challenges during post-COVID-19. Today we are streaming live from Facebook, Faculty of Engineering. Today, we would like to welcome yang berbahagia Mr. NAGUIB bin Muhammad Noor, CEO of STRAND, with his interesting topic entitled COVID-19 Accelerating Industry 4.0 Disruption. Without further ado, I would like to invite yang berusaha Profesor Dr. Engineer Dr. Muhammad Rafiq Dr. Abdul Qadir, Dean Faculty of Engineering, to introduce our captain today. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Murni. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning to our speaker, Mr. NAGUIB. And also a very good morning to all of you watching this Captain of Industry webinar live through our Faculty of Engineering Facebook. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much to our presenter today. Despite his busy schedule, can still slot an hour with us to share his experience leading an aerospace industry. Let me brief all of you a short biography of our speaker. Mr. NAGUIB is CEO of STRAND Aerospace Malaysia and President of Malaysia Aerospace Industry Association, MAIA. He began his career growing a UK aerospace startup and then returned to Malaysia to build STRAND Aerospace Malaysia into an organization leading the design and analysis engineering services industry in Malaysia. Mr. NAGUIB has been active as an engineer, technologist, and business developer in the global aerospace supply chain since the year 2000. He speaks frequently on aerospace and other technology subjects at global events. His deep understanding of technology comes through his 18 years of experience as an aerospace engineer supporting the design and development of commercial aircraft and aerospace companies. Without further ado, I call upon Mr. NAGUIB. Over to you, Mr. NAGUIB.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera semua. Thank you very much, Prof. Datuk, for that very kind introduction. So it does cover quite a lot of my background. So it sounds like I should be older than I am, but today 44 years old. And I have been doing all those things that you briefed since I began my career in the aerospace industry back in the year 1999. So I've got some slides that I would like to sort of share and talk through. Okay, so I think everybody can see that. I hope the internet connection remains relatively stable so that we can you can get a clear sound, yeah, from my home office here. What I wanted to do today, I'm sure there's a lot of aerospace engineers on the live feed now, and I understand there will be a question and answer session after this, right? Having said that, I invite any questions as we go along, and I'm happy to answer them. But what I wanted to do here is really talk about some of the work that I have done in STRAND to do with the fourth industrial revolution, and what my opinions are on how COVID-19 affects what is happening to the industrial landscape of Malaysia today. So I think apart from the work that was briefed by Prof. Datuk now, I'm also today STRAND has got a few verticals, right? So when I started the company, we were only doing the design of aircraft. So I say only doing, obviously it's a very difficult thing to do. And we're working on what you call primary structures. So we were working on the wings, the fuselage, the landing gear. So these kind of designs, and we were doing a lot of detailed design and analysis work, right? So today we continue to do that as part of the company, but we also have a consulting arm, which I founded probably about 5 to 6 years ago now, which sprung out of our data analytics capability. So the data analytics capability we had is a natural capability that we have because we design aircraft using a lot of data, right? So as part of the process of designing aircraft, what you have to do is you have to look at a lot of loads data, a lot of structural data, a lot of load case assessments, and then structural configurations as well, which are obviously based on the raw data that I described. And then you have to funnel them into a prioritized collection of information, which then will design the aircraft ready for operations, right, in the real world. So that whole exercise is actually a data prioritization, cleanup, analytics process, right? So from there, STRAND had a natural capability to manage a lot of complex data, which are coming from different angles, right? And then to synthesize outcomes and also then ways forward or advisory. So from there, we began to do a data-based advisory for companies looking at developing things like industrial parks and also state and federal government projects looking at industrial roadmaps for the country. We also supported companies to transform from non-aerospace sectors into aerospace. So for example, UMW, I think at that point, just to mention yesterday, a good friend of mine, the CEO, president of UMW Group, unfortunately passed away. Allah yarham Badrul Faisal. He was a visionary CEO of UMW that got into aerospace. And through his leadership and the support of STRAND, we got UMW to become a tier 1 supplier to Rolls-Royce. All right, so they went from no experience in aerospace to becoming a supplier to Rolls-Royce at a tier 1 level. That means they did directly with Rolls-Royce without any second or third tiers. Without any first tiers between them and the final OEM. Right. So that was quite an achievement, and since then we've advised many other companies, from SMEs to large companies, to do this transformation. Right. So why I wanted to give you that background is because as we were doing this, we also work with the federal and state governments on industrial roadmaps. So I'm at the moment, I've completed first 2 phases of the Selangor state government's Industry 4.0 roadmap. So I will share some insights here from that work. But in there, what we were tasked to do was to look at the Selangor industrial ecosystem and look at the different verticals, right? And then look at priority areas that the state can focus on and strategies that the state can adopt in order to be successful in the 4th Industrial Revolution, right? So without further ado, then let me go through some of these slides. So one of the things that I would like to emphasize here, right, is that COVID-19 has actually accelerated the 4th Industrial Revolution. Okay, so a lot of people ask me what I mean by that, right? But what that means is that a lot of the disruptions that we had anticipated for Industry 4.0, right? So on the left of my slide here, you see data-driven manufacture, remote virtual workforce, online retail and delivery. These are all activities enabled by technologies that were anticipated as being prevalent during for the 4th Industrial Revolution. Prior to COVID-19, most of this was anticipated to be sort of a 5-year to 10-year sort of horizon, yeah, in terms of these things happening. If you look at the disruption that these examples create in the industry and marketplace, right? So we talk about data-driven manufacturing, for example, where 3D printing is the go-to technology most people would refer to. Okay. What it does is it reduces the need for logistics. It simplifies the supply chain because you're printing now, so you don't have to create first a block of metal, so you don't have a material supplier creating, first digging up metal from the ground, and then a mill creating from that raw ore into blocks of refined metal for different industries, and then supplying that to machining and assembly companies to produce components and assemblies, right? Instead, what you have now is somebody creating powder from raw material, from raw stuff that you dig from the ground, for example, and then that goes into a 3D printing machine, which then prints out what it is that you want to create, right? So that's a simplification of the supply chain. And then you find that with this kind of technologies, Industry 4.0 also about customization, right? So in the customization, it is about making products suit to use, right? So it's not a mass-produced product that everyone then buys one type of product. It is based on what is the need of the consumer. So in COVID-19, you find that the sheer disruption in the logistics chains has resulted in the need for something like data-driven manufacture by 3D printing. Okay, so let me explain that a little bit. What that means is that if now, for example, you see the headline on the news item there, Malaysia seeks to clear congested ports to remove essentials amid curbs, right? So what happened there was that due to ships not being able to come in because of COVID-19, the supply chains that these ships are enabling, which is the materials and so on and so forth, were blocked off, right? And going forward, with COVID-19, this is going to be with us for quite a while. These lines of logistics are naturally going to be constantly disrupted, right? For one reason or another, right? So for that, then, it bears to reason that the new industrial landscape would be more internalized to the market, right? So you don't want to have to rely on billets of material coming from the United States just so you can manufacture something of a product in Malaysia that you might want to use for the local or the regional market, right? So therefore, it pushes you towards adopting the technologies on the left, which is towards 3D printing, right? So there's a localization of supply chain brought upon by a physical disruption of the transportation lines of the supply chain, okay? So if I go down, then I think the second one, everybody, including I suppose to the universities now, this is a given, right? Remote virtual workforce. I'm giving this speech today here like this on prior to COVID-19. I would have probably been flown out to see you in UTM and provide this talk, right? But this remote virtual workforce now has become the norm. So STRAND, for example, we work today. We are trialing 2 days a week, Monday and Wednesday, that we are in the office. So that's solely for brainstorming, physical brainstorming when we need to do it. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we focus on product delivery, which we can do from home, right? So this change, then you see, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, there was an assessment. I think Zoom today is worth more than all 7 of the world's largest airlines put together. Right? Zoom, a complete startup, is now worth, all 7 airlines, top airlines put together, is worth more than that. So what does that mean? That means that this virtual reality of working, of collaborating, is now going to be a new norm. Having said that, for the aerospace industry, there is always a silver lining, because actually the aerospace industry, there is only one way to physically still transport you at the speed that you need to, i.e. to go from here to the UK, for example, within a day, which is via an aircraft. And the other thing is that the market today, based on the backlog prior to COVID-19, which is a backlog of 40,000 aircraft that are on order but have not yet been produced, was still looking at a population of about 20% of the world only having flown. That means only 20% of the world's population has ever taken a flight. The 80% of the developing world which has yet to take a flight. So with that, there was still a backlog order of about 40,000 aircraft, right? So there will constantly be a requirement for aircraft, but there may be evolutions. And the last line on this deck here, you see online retail and delivery, you see drone transportation, right? So that kind of delivery system now, which is an aerospace solution, right? I know it's a toy right now for most people, but in fact, to fly delivery services across the country will require the same level of air traffic control, in fact, more complex level of air traffic control as you do today with your commercial airlines, right? So in here are evolutions for the aerospace industry, but also now a major disruption for what will happen to retail real estate, right? So and here's a very important point, that with retail real estate, which is your shopping malls, so on and so forth, a lot of the developments in the country are based on mixed development business models. So what you have in the middle of the development is a retail and a commercial space, where it attracts a certain kind of business and a certain kind of population. And then outside of that, then you have housing and so on and so forth. So the valuation of the houses and all the properties around there base themselves on an overall business model of a mixed development, right? So if retail, for example, goes completely online, which if you go to a mall today, you will see this is pretty stark, right? There are very few people in the malls today. Then what happens to all this real estate, right? So there's a massive disruption in terms of the brick and mortar industry, which is the construction industry, okay? So, so I'm just going to keep talking here. I know there's a lot of information, but I suppose there will be a Q&A as we go along. So the impact of the national economy is quite devastating. I think this is particularly pertinent information to be sharing with graduates, because it's not going to be an easy next 2 years for graduating people. We're anticipating, and this is some of the work that I did with the Economic Planning Unit as well. These numbers are now commonplace within the government circles. We're looking at upwards of 2.4 million unemployment, probably in the next 3 to 6 months, my guess is, right? I think by next week, a lot of retrenchments will begin to happen already, right? And it's a massive loss in household income. So this COVID disruption, as far as economic disruption, is quite dramatic, okay? So if you look historically at what's happened in Malaysia, you see A, B, C here are previous economic crises that we've had. And what's interesting here is that if you look at the crisis in the 1985 to 1995 period, right? How did we deal with that? That first crisis was dealt with by, how shall I say, vitalizing the electronics industry, right? Prior to that, we were a commodity-based economy, i.e. Rubber, oil palm, tin, right? Those kind of commodities. And then in 1985, when there was a commodity crash, the government pushed heavily into the E&E sector, and now we find that the E&E sector is a large part of our manufacturing economy, right? Then you have the following crisis shown in B, where there was more of a money crisis because it was more of a ringgit valuation issue. And you see a lot of corporate reforms moving into C, where we had economic transformation. There we had, again, a money type crisis, where the valuation of the ringgit again was affected. And during, this is the Najib Tun Razak years, he launched the economic transformation, which looked at new sectors, sectoral growth. Having said that, it had some level of success, not a full level of success, because a lot of it was still at the very high level of project management rather than at the industrial development level that you see in A. In A, what happened was we attracted a lot of FDI that set up into the country. And these guys then founded the new manufacturing base, right? Whereas in C, we were trying to create new industries, but we had mixed success with that. Having said that, because it was a lot a fiscal financial crisis, it was addressed to some degree by the economic transformation program. So now we have COVID-19, right? And as you know, the effect of COVID-19 has been likened to what happened after the Second World War, right? Which is one of the greatest depressions that the world has ever seen. This is the situation we are in now. And so Malaysia now has to diversify its economic base and fundamentals, right? So almost revisiting A, which means we have to look back at our manufacturing sector, we have to look back at our services sector, and we have to try and understand what would be the new drivers of the economy post-COVID, right? So that's a big one. I'm not sure if there are questions that I should take at this point. I suppose, yeah, I just keep talking, right? Okay, so this is a breakdown of the GDP of our country. Okay, so if you look at it, 55.3% of our economy is based on services, and 23.6% on manufacturing. Okay, so that's the big chunk of our economy. So if you look at Industry 4.0, this is the two that get affected the most, right? So you come back to the slides that I showed before, right? A lot of this disruption is disrupting the blue and the red sections of this pie chart. Okay, so you can see our GDP and our economic basis is at severe risk, right? And because Industry 4.0 now is happening at a much faster pace, you know, as opposed to 5 to 10 year horizon, what you will see over the next few months is a degradation in this 80% roughly of the national economy and the basis for the ringgit, right? So here is where I think at the university level, this is not just a problem that economists should be dealing with. To be honest, I don't think, most economists would be prepared for what this is, right? Because economists do not build industry, right? And they develop theories of how economies should be run, but they're not industrial developers per se, right? And if you look back at what this was, this is a fundamental shift in the economic basis of the manufacturing and the services industry. Okay, so I think you should stare at this diagram for a little while, because you need to absorb the impact that COVID-19 and the bringing forward of Industry 4.0 will have on you personally, right? So where is the economy going? I think you see a lot in the world now. They talk about a more balanced economy, and I think all universities had already been looking at this, you know, ecological considerations. I think Professor Zaini Ujang speaks a lot about sustainability, environmental concerns, and such like. And this is something where the balance between the public sector, private sector, and the social sector, creating what in the World Economic Forum they call the fourth sector, right, is edging towards where world economies are going towards. So you find that a lot of the economies which are successful in managing COVID-19 have been economies led by female leaders, right? And I personally believe it's because there's a better balance of these three things. There's a natural instinct for women, right? So how do you balance the public sector, the social sector, and the private sector? If you look across the world today, there's a lot of talks about universal basic income. Yeah. So universal basic income doesn't necessarily always mean just money in your pocket from the government. I know the stimulus packages that we've had recently that the government have announced have talked about providing income to the people who companies are not able to provide income under the conditions of the crisis, but that's not what UBI is. UBI is a perpetual system of providing either physical income, i.e. money, or means of sustaining somebody's housing, food, yeah, education, healthcare, and transportation, right? And these five sectors will gravitate towards these business models, which is what they call the fourth sector. So if I take transportation as an example, where aerospace again plays a major role, if you look at the business model of the automotive industry versus the business model of the aerospace industry, the aircraft is utilized at a very high rate, right? So more than 80% utilization. You take your Air Asia flight, it lands in the airport. It's turned around within 45 minutes of you leaving the aircraft, after you depart the aircraft, and it takes off again. And it continues to do this. So as an aerospace engineer, the job of the structural engineer is to design the structure to continuously do something like that for 20, 25 years, right? So if you think about your car's utilization is only maybe 15%, right? So 85% of the day, probably more today, under the CMCO, is parked or it's not doing very much at all. But you pay 100% of the value of that car, right? So for that, then the 100% value of that vehicle, 85% is being wasted. Okay, 85% is being wasted. In the aerospace industry, for commercial aviation, that would be intolerable. There was no way you can pay back the cost of the aircraft if your business model was to only use the aircraft for 15% of its life. All right. So the aircraft is actually used like a service tool, a tool to provide a service of transportation. Whereas the automotive industry today is about sale of asset, which is a car that you buy. Hence, you have so many different types of cars for you to buy, right? Because it appeals to a consumer sentiment. But if you talk to someone like Elon Musk, right? Although today he's making what looks like very fancy cars, the end goal is not about making cars. The end goal is to provide a transportation service that would be utilizing assets at a much higher level, but probably via some sort of app, right? Where you call the car, it comes, you get in, it takes you where you need to go, you get off, it goes and picks up someone else, right? And if that were the case, and today your cars are only used 15% of the time, the rest of the 85% now, for a mobility vehicle, which is what this is called, a mobility industry, it is close to 80+% utilization, which means instead of one person, one car, 5 to 6 people are effectively sharing one car. So what does that mean in as far as the production of motor vehicles in the world? I think in the US, it's today 480 million cars or something like that, that's required for the US market. And the studies was done by, I can't remember the consulting company that we've referred to. It's a global study that would reduce to something like 40 to 50 million mobility vehicles because of this 1:5, 1:6 ratio of utilization. So if you knock down Toyota or Nissan sales by even 10% globally, these companies which are based on large volumes of production and consumer consumption would not be able to sustain, right? Because they are also very heavily geared, right? They're based on a lot of loans and a lot of financial structures that keep them up where they are, but expanding. So they're always talking about expansion, right? They're trying to grow and sell more and more cars. So the 4.0 business model would be the opposite of that. It'll be about having fewer cars doing more work. So higher utilization, and hence that is a more sustainable industry, right? So instead of a car factory making cars for sale, you will have a more modular factory maybe that today will produce the cars for the mobility service. Tomorrow will be repairing cars for the mobility service. And then the next day would be upgrading cars for an upgraded service, right? And all of that based on platforms which are part of a circular economy, right? So parts get recycled, metal gets reused, electronic components get upgraded, but always reused. So this is where the fourth sector in transportation will head towards. What does that mean is that there will not be car companies, there will be mobility companies, right? So I don't think this is a very difficult thing to perceive. If you consider, I think a lot of you may use services like Spotify. And for Spotify, then what you find is that what used to be, when I was young anyway, a preoccupation of most young boys and girls, which is collecting compact discs, right? So we go and we buy 44 ringgit, 45 ringgit per compact disc, of the favorite artists that we want to listen to. And we will compile this and put it on our shelves as a matter of pride. This is my CD compilation. And we will listen to these CDs, right? As limited by the number that we have on our shelves and the pocket money we had in our pocket. But today, if I use Spotify, 11, 14 ringgit a month, I get all the music of the world up to hi-fi quality, right? And I am not limited with any physical space at all. So what does that mean is that now more people can enjoy more music. And therefore, the CD as a physical asset now becomes redundant, right? In fact, it becomes defunct. So if you imagine the whole industry that's behind production of these plastic CDs is now gone, right? So the effect of 4.0 on the business models of industries gone past is quite significant. And I think at the university level, engineers need to understand this, because the future of engineering is about enabling a sustainable world, irrespective of which field of engineering, whether it be transportation or energy or even construction, right? In construction engineering, so I mentioned that brick and mortar is now going to be a difficult industry to sustain. What would be the future of housing and commercial real estate? I think a lot of that will be in repurposing. So if you look at this, you see Paris is opening the world's largest urban rooftop farm, right? At the same time, I think in Paris also now they have converted car parks into vertical farms or urban farms as well. So that's a very significant step forward, because what it does is that it shortens the logistics chain between the food and the consumer, right? So if you look at this, this trend, then this change in consumer behavior, change in how the world economies work, and obviously then the change in the politics of the world, which you can see today, will be very significant, right? And in fact, COVID-19 has basically made this happen today, right? So what today you see on a weekly basis, change used to take years to happen. Now every week something is happening that will make this happen, right? So it's not something which is for the near future. It is now, here and now, right? And so it's my second last slide. Not sure how I'm doing for time, but effectively now what we have is a disruption model, right? That I've come up with my team for me to explain what kind of work that needs to be done in order for us to be able to cope with such changes in the economy and the global industrial landscape, right? So here I've got what is I call the disruption cycle. So you have business as usual, which is what you expect a business to do, like the car industry, for example, right? So they produce cars for sale, people buy cars, they keep them in their garages, they take them out 50% of the day, and then they park them again, and then they spend a lot of money maintaining them. So their entire business cycle is a business as usual, right? And for those then, what you can do is you can track what is happening with these business as usual models, right? Because as technologies evolve and people find ways of making business more accessible. So I think that, again, if I take the aerospace industry as an example, the theme of AirAsia, everybody can fly. Now everybody can fly, right? So the whole idea was allowing everybody what was the privilege of a few many years ago. Yeah. So as it becomes more ubiquitous, the technology enabling it, right, makes these business model achievable, right? So emergent technology, market evolutions, you see in the quantification space here, supply chain evolutions, these will begin to disrupt what was business as usual, right? And you need to look at identifying these risks, market trends, movements of goods and freight, right? Input-output tables, economic tables of countries, right? Will show you markers of things changing within the business as usual business models, right? And then as these things change, eventually a disruption happens. So I've put in the trigger there will be a trigger point, right? So a tipping point of some sort. In this case, we see force majeure, which is COVID-19, creating this major disruption. What's more important to note is that the issue is that what happens after the trigger point, right? We are going towards a new equilibrium. So our government talks about a new norm. In fact, it's a new equilibrium. This new equilibrium doesn't go the other way back again, right? It will not reverse itself. So once things change, they remain changed. And policy changes, governments will launch pilot initiatives, like you saw just now in France, in Spain, universal-based income, urban farming. All these pilot initiatives will then effect policy change, and there'll be systemic disruption in the business models of business as usual. And then the new equilibrium will eventually become a business as usual, right? So in the outer circle here, performance tracking, identifying risk, trends and significant events, controls and measures, these are all the things that we need to be doing as a country at every level, not just the government, but I think at institutions like University of Technology Malaysia, I would have thought these kind of things become fundamental to future research of your students, of your institution, right? Because it allows for us to plan what is it that we're going to be doing next, right? And then plan our business models accordingly, right? So, you know, I described this for the automotive industry just now, right? So that's what it could look like, you know. So you look at today on the right here, you see cars being manufactured, then you have technology then coming in, all these autonomous mobility vehicles, you know. If you go to the Detroit Motor Show, they're just showing you autonomous, sorry, they're talking about mobility, no more about cars. And then finally, something happens, a market disruptor comes in, right? So whether it's Tesla, today the second largest capitalized automotive company, which is actually a mobility company now taking lead, right? And then a new equilibrium of solutions and so on taking shape, and then finally a new norm, which is the elimination of a consumer car market, right? So I'd like to leave it there for the moment, because I think I have talked for nearly 40 minutes or so. Is this a convenient point to ask for questions?
Interesting topic today. Then we will proceed for the questions from our viewers.
Was the audio okay just now?
Pardon?
Was the audio okay just now?
Yes, sure, of course. I can hear your voice clear, loud and clear, Mr. Nakib. Hold on, let me check. All right, okay. Very long question from Hanafi Azmi. Salam to Nakib, I'm Mr. Hanafi Azmi from IIM. How do you foresee the potential growth in space exploration technologies to launch a vehicle satellite high altitude balloon during post-COVID globally, or maybe specifically in our country? After the success of Falcon 9, SpaceX, it looks like there are many major space enthusiasts, but lack of platform to contribute and industry to support. Please advise and many thanks. Okay. Also, thank you for Dr. Hanafi.
Okay. So first question here, right, is that so the whole time I've been talking, you notice I speak about business. So first thing I need to emphasize that I have no business training. Okay, so I am an engineer through and through, right? I did my degree in aerospace engineering at the Manchester University. I did a master's in aircraft design at Cranfield University with quite a few of my colleagues, which are now UTM heads of departments. I learned doing business as an entrepreneur, right? So I set up my consultancy services for engineering, and I built up an outsourcing function where we took work from us in the United Kingdom and we did the work in Malaysia, right? So I had to then train my engineers because a university degree doesn't ready you to do work forever, right? You need to be trained still. So I had to then develop a training capability to then help my engineers do the work, right? So I had to build it up from there. And then after that, I realized, I need to I'm competing with a lot of Indian companies, like Tata Consulting Services, like Tech Mahindra, and all these large companies. Tech Mahindra and Tata, 100,000 engineers are making maybe 10 to 12 billion US dollars a year in revenue. Okay, so I was competing against those guys. So I realized that then I help companies in Asia to bring aerospace manufacturing to Malaysia. So I did a transformation service, right? Based on my aerospace knowledge and my entrepreneurial thing, then I learned everything else on YouTube and the internet. I developed a consulting capability that allowed billion-dollar contracts to be realized in Malaysia. All right. So now I'm beginning to have workflow that's coming from a Malaysian supply chain. Okay. So platform you ask about. So first you need to understand what is the business model of space. I think there's a lot of fascination that we have with the technology of space, but you need to understand that the business model of space is something else. Yeah, it's not about the enthusiasm of space. It is about how you're going to make something sustainable as a means of feeding people or providing a service, right? In order for that to then create a sustainable industry. Okay, so the lack of platform, I believe, is because there's a lack of space industry maturity in the country. I think there's a lot of people with the knowledge of space technology, but the understanding of a space business model is yet to be seen, right? And at the Aerospace Industry Association, we have a space division under that. And that's why I can say that, because I've not seen it yet, right? So space technology, Elon Musk has launched last week SpaceX, right? Fantastic, right? But the thing you have to understand about what Elon Musk has done is that he has just basically made commercial space industry now viable to some degree. Not completely viable yet, because it's not yet a sustainable model. He's still subsidizing that. Don't forget, Elon Musk, apparently, this is what they say anyway, this is the reports, right? All his money goes into all the business, right? So he lives on loans and financing from banks, as his own consumption, right? So he doesn't have his own money per se, right? Like typical entrepreneur, right? So we dump all our cash into our business to see where it's going to go, right? But we put our money where our mouth is. Right? That's what we have to do. And you may fail doing that. And Elon Musk has failed doing that before, right? Does it stop him? No. Richard Branson has failed doing that before. Does it stop him? No. But there are 1,000,001 other entrepreneurs which have failed and you may not know of. Okay? So the space industry is very much one now, as Elon Musk has proven from last week, one driven by entrepreneurship. So forget about your government giving you a handout to create a space industry. That's not going to happen easily under these circumstances. It is about you creating your own industrial opportunity and then putting your money where your mouth is, right? So I think this is one very important point to put out to engineers, because I think we get into this mindset of we have nothing to do with the business. We are just there to create the products, right? Because that's what we're good at. None of the successful technology entrepreneurs today are like that, right? All of them understand what they have to do to make their products commercially viable and for their dreams to be realized. But for that, some of them are willing to sacrifice their own luxuries, right? To just see a dream happen, So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's been my experience with the space industry in Malaysia.
Okay. Correct. From Mr. Kanan Paruma, what do you say there will be no reverse? Aren't we rushing without being really ready for it? And what's your view?
Well, I think this is Major Kanan. Yeah. So I can understand the context of the question. There will be no reverse in that there will be a new norm. Okay, so for the aerospace industry, Major, yes, there will be a new norm. Will they still be flying? I believe so. I believe so. Having said that, even prior to COVID-19, the environmental pressure on the aerospace industry was severe. Right, I think the Euro standards required by the year 2050 that the carbon footprint of the aerospace industry be zeroized back to the levels of 2015. Right. So imagine, right, all those supposedly 40,000 new aircraft into the sky, and your carbon footprint was supposed to be back at 2015 levels, right? So there was already a push towards changing the nature of the planes. Some conversations that I had with sort of technologists in Airbus, they talk about modular aircraft that last, that don't go for 25 years anymore, but they get recycled after 5 or 6 years. And because they're more, carbon fiber, and they've got more electric engines and so on and so forth, they don't have to have the right reliability of long-term 20 years life cycles, but instead have a 5-year life cycle, which means that they can be more efficient in that life cycle. So all of those things would affect the aerospace industry fundamentally, right? So there will be no reverse from that. Will there still be an aerospace industry? I believe so, yes. I won't be rushing without being really ready for it. Malaysia is not ready for anything. I can safely say that right now, but we're not alone, right? So everybody is struggling. Our biggest challenge in Malaysia is that as a collective, our triple helix construct, which is the collaboration between government, academia, and industry, is nowhere near ready to tackle what is the market change that I have just shown, right? So my belief is that we will go into a deep recession or depression, right? But through there, just like in the Second World War, remember the Second World War. After the Second World War, we were peers with Korea, we were peers with Japan, we were peers with Taiwan, right? Those were our peers, but those countries had no natural resources. So after the Second World War, they built industry. So from a sewing machine shop became Honda, right? From whatever, some small startup became Hyundai, right? So these countries don't have massive MNCs that run the economy. All their MNCs are Korean, Japanese, or Taiwanese. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, we have a lot of resources. So after the Second World War, first thing we did was got the British to come back in, set up businesses, and we all went for jobs with them, right? So that's what happened. So it was a second wave of colonization, and then after we had a third wave with the Japanese conglomerates, and then the American conglomerates, and so much so, I'm sure when UTM, right? What's the ambition of most of your students is to join a big multinational and get a business card that says, "I am an engineer in Airbus," right? That's the ambition. But going forward, these large corporations now are being shaken by what are startups, right? So what you have to understand now is that the market is what we are now going to lose if we are not ready. This Southeast Asian market, you think about Netflix today, right? What was RTM and Astro's revenue, which is Malaysian jobs and Malaysian revenue before, is no longer Malaysian jobs or revenue. All that money you're watching Netflix with is going straight across the internet to, where is it, Sweden? I think it is, right, for Netflix, right, or Spotify, right? So there is an entire service industry disrupted before your very eyes, right? And it happened without COVID-19, right? COVID-19 is going to disrupt a lot more than just that. So to answer your question, yeah, and I think we have to say that now. We have to say that. Unfortunately, I think the government took a while to say that because, Malaysians don't like to hear bad news, right? But I think 2-3 weeks ago, Tengku Zafrul actually said we are going into a recession. He actually said it, right? And the Ministry of Finance knows this, but they've known this for a while, to be honest. They've known this for a while, but they've been trying to figure out how to get around it. Yeah. But COVID-19 has kind of made this even more devastating. One thing good, I think, about Malaysia is you see that we band together. So our togetherness is still strong, although there are still racial tensions now which are being heightened. So those are irresponsible parties, but I think generally we are going to be sticking together, right? But how do we realize what is the future of our economy? That's something we have to think about now.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Najib. Okay, we go for the next question from Mr. Jafar Rahman. Good morning, Mr. Najib. Would you elaborate more on the design in general of Dornier's C-style and CBS aircraft? Such beautiful aircraft. Okay. But I don't know. I have done nothing but that. Sorry.
Yeah, they're just talking about the aircraft that we're doing right now. So this is the STRAND's biggest project at the moment, because Airbus and Boeing have not done anything new in terms of aircraft development for quite a while now. Most of them are sort of legacy work that they're doing. So we do a bit of legacy work, but most of our aircraft work now is for the Dornier C-Star. It is an amphibious aircraft. What's interesting about this was that it is a German, the name Dornier is a very old German aerospace name. The industry was built around Lake Victoria in Munich, right? It's a beautiful large lake, and why the seaplane, right? That's where they did all the testing for the aircraft. And the Dornier family over time basically became less and less rich, shall I say. And the C-Star was one of the designs that they still had under the family, which was eventually bought by a Chinese conglomerate, a Chinese government, right? So in fact, it was bought by the Wuxi government of China, which is a provincial government. And the Wuxi government has got a very big island and a bay, right? So they bought this aircraft company to have a plane that can take people from the bay to the island and back. So they ordered 350 aircraft from the company that they bought, and they pumped about 300 million euros into that company, which was dying at the time. And Alhamdulillah, STRAND was contracted to do predominantly most of the engineering behind the C-Star. So it's an old design. It's from the 60s. We have modernized it now with new materials. We've lightened it up quite a bit. And we productionized it to today's standards, and it's now going through its recertification. It's an inline two-propeller engine aircraft, which is quite strange. It's very, very cool in that way. It's got two propellers on either end. It is about a 6 to 8 seat aircraft, which has got a lot of different sort of ferry functions, as well as search and rescue and military functions as well. So yeah, we're very proud of the aircraft. But interestingly, it was originally bought. The design was originally bought, but not completed the buyout in the 80s by Tun Mahathir. So the original tools for the C-Star actually were in Langkawi for a very long time. But I think that's one of the deals that fell through, and the Chinese eventually bought it in the 2000s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I guess it might be the last question from our viewers. Let me check for you. Okay. All right. Okay. Then, okay. I think that's it for now. No more questions, Julia. Okay. Thank you for our viewers and for your questions. And also thank you again for Mr. Najib. I will pass to Prof. Suhaimi for the last few words, because he replaced our Dr. Rafiq, because he has something to do. We have today is very hectic and very tight schedule for everybody in Faculty of Engineering. But always we have such honor to have you for today, and despite of your busy schedule, you are actually put your precious time with us, and we are very we are very grateful for that. Oh, okay. We have another question from Asya Umara. What are the implications to investors? Okay.
Okay. So that's in fact, I had some slides actually to do with investment, but I didn't get into them just now because I wanted questions. But okay, since you brought it up now, well, there's a lot of different types, right? You might be asking as an equity investor, or you might be asking as somebody that invests money in the stock market, right? I think stock market, I mean, you can see it yourself, right? It's completely disrupted now. And if you look at the Malaysian stock market, underlying most of our stocks, the GLCs and so on and so forth, right? If you look at the Bursa punya construct, most of it actually underlying it is infrastructure projects, right? Or commodity-based revenues, which is oil and gas and palm oil and stuff like that. Right? So how I just explained that, right? So a company that does construction, maybe like Gamuda or someone like that, they get government contracts, they're a big part of the stock market. But the government invests in those infrastructure projects. They may be building a highway or whatever it is, using what is effectively commodity-based money, right? They base it on oil money. So the construct of our bursa is, and then whatever else is in a consumer type of market, right? It's a consumer market. It's a local consumer market. So a company like UMW selling cars only sells Toyota cars to the Malaysian market, doesn't sell it outside of the Malaysian market, right? So it is a contained stock market, the bursa, which really needs new assets into it, new companies, new startups. And I know bursa has been looking for, Security Commission has been looking for new companies and new investments to spice up the market a little bit more, right? So fundamentally, the Malaysian market, I've already put all my money out of it, so that's what I can tell you about that. I did that. I lost a lot of money on it, so it's something which I don't. I mean, I'm not an active investor. I was a passive investor, so it didn't quite work out if you're trying to do a long term on that kind of market. The global market extremely volatile as well, and speaking to people who are investing their money, because actually today there's a lot of money, right? You want a space industry, you want 10 billion US dollars. I got people who have 10 billion US dollars to invest, but will they invest in your space industry? That's a question mark, right? So unfortunately, a lot of the money is conservative in that it doesn't want to go to places where they cannot guarantee their 10, 15, 20% returns, right? And the global investment marketplace today is volatile. So I think it's much more about value investing rather than passive investing going forward, right? And some commodities like gold, I personally as a Muslim believe that those are the, if you're a passive investor, that's one of the places to stick your money, because nobody knows what's going to happen to cash, right? And at least the Quran has guaranteed the gold and silver. So I think investors, tough time if you are the traditional type investor, opportunity time if you are a value investor, but you have to be very understanding. Look at a company called ARK Invest. They're invested in Tesla. You watch the YouTube videos, ARK Invest, and you see how they articulate investment strategies, and you'll find that it's very different from most investment strategies of traditional investment companies.
Thank you. InsyaAllah, you listen, you do more. Alright, okay. Without further ado, I will pass back to Professor Shuhaini Mansoor. Okay, and thank you again for Mr. Nakib. InsyaAllah, we'll meet again in future, maybe after COVID-19 is over. Please welcome to Faculty of Engineering in Campus Johor Bahru. InsyaAllah, okay. Alright, then I would like to invite Professor Shuhaini to be with us today. Where is he now? We are waiting for him.
Hello.
Prof.
Thank you so much, Madam Murni. How are you?
Good, Prof.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I hope everything fine. Selamat Hari Raya, maaf zahir batin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to swap the dean because he has something urgent to do. So on behalf of, we would like to thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your valuable experience despite your busy schedule. Actually, yeah, I know you had a meeting in the early morning. So then yesterday was a dry run. Thank you for spending your valuable time. So I hope we can continue working together and strengthen our collaborations, especially on your, you're pursuing this IR 4.0. So we here as a team, we would like to support you as much as we can. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And to all the viewers, thank you so much again for watching our webinar series. And don't forget to join our next webinar. I wish you Selamat Hari Raya, Maaf Zahir Batin. Don't forget to like our FB Live. So to the students, I hope that you can prepare yourself for the COVID era as advised by Mr. Najib. For that, thank you much. Hopefully we can join again in our series. That's all.
Thank you, Prof. Suhaimi, and thank you for our viewers today, and thank you for your support for our webinar series, Captain of Industry. It's always a pleasure for us having our large number of viewers for our webinar, Captain of Industry today. Please wait for our upcoming webinar with our next Captain of Industry in future. With this, we would like to wish Selamat Hari Raya, Maaf Zahir dan Batin. And from no one of us would imagine this unprecedented time. But however, please enjoy our session, our webinar series in future, and please enjoy your Hari Raya, your balance of Hari Raya, or puasa 6 or whatsoever. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep your social distancing. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share our program. Have a good day, and wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.